Okay, guys, so I think this is where we left off in section 4.5. I don't think we did this one, did we? Okay, so find a function that has zeros of 4 and negative 6. So if we have a 0 of 4, what would that have been as a factor? Good, x minus 4. And what would this have been as a factor? Right. So now if I want to find the function, I would just FOIL this out. So I do my first times my first, I get x squared. My outers, I get plus 6x. My inners, I get negative 4x. And my last times my last, I get negative 24. I need to simplify that, and we're going to get x squared plus 2x minus 24. The other thing we can do with this is we could find the sum and the product. So we can find the sum and the product of our zeros. So what is the sum of those two numbers? So here's our two zeros. The sum is going to be what we get when we add these. What do we get if we add them? And then the product is going to be what we get when we multiply them. So remember our formula we talked about, how it goes x squared minus the sum x plus the product. And that should give us another way of coming up with the function that has these zeros. So the function is going to be x squared minus the sum. So if I do minus negative 2, what do I get? Plus 2x, and then plus the product. But if it's plus negative 24, and see how we get the same answer. Okay? So that is a helpful thing to know. So right here, it says the irrational conjugates theorem says if a plus radical b is a 0 of a function, then a minus radical b must be a 0 of the function. And then the next thing we're always going to use is this x squared minus the sum x plus the product. Now, before we get into this difficult problem, I want to take one that's a little bit easier. So what if I tell you 3 plus radical 2 is a solution or a 0? The conjugate just means this stays the same, this stays the same, but we change that middle sign. So if 3 plus radical 2 is a solution, what must be the other one?
3 minus.
Right. So these two are conjugates. If I tell you this is a solution, then this must be. What if I tell you that this is a solution? Then what must the other solution be? Right. And then if I asked you to come up with an equation that had these solutions, you would want to find the sum. What do you get if you add those two together? 4, good. If we multiply them, they're binomials, so I'd have to FOIL. I would do the first times the first. I would do the outers. I would do the inners. And I would do the last. Radical 5 times radical 5 is radical 25, which is just 5. What does all of that simplify down to? Negative 1. So then the equation that would have these two values for solutions would be the function x squared minus the sum x and then plus the product. So this would be the equation that would have those two solutions. Let's say you don't really buy that or something. So look, guys, if I had this that I had to solve, let's go the other way. We're saying this is the answer now to, or this is the problem that would give us these answers. How would I solve this problem to double check? How could I do it? Quadratic formula would work, yep. So I can do negative b, which is 4, plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a. That gives me 4 plus or minus, that's 20. 20 is 2 radical 5. What does that simplify to? And isn't that the same thing that we set up here? Right? Those were supposed to be the solutions, and that's what we get for the solutions when we go back and solve those. Do you guys understand what we're doing there? Kind of like a double check. All right, now let's go to this more difficult problem. So they tell us that we're trying to write a polynomial function g, so we're supposed to name it g, and we have a leading coefficient of 1, that just means right there's 1, and the zeros are -5 and 4 plus radical 2. Well, if 4 plus radical 2 is a solution, what else has to be a solution?
4 minus radical 2.
Good. And now I'm going to have to do that sum and product to find out what's the equation just for these two. What's the sum, guys, if I add those? You do 4 plus radical 2 plus 4 minus radical 2. What's the sum? 8. For the product, I have to do the first times the first is 16. The outers are -4 radical 2. The inners are +4 radical 2. What's the last times the last?
2.
2, right? So what's that going to give us then for the product? 14, good. So far our equation is x squared minus 8x plus 14. Okay? That is the function that is going to have these two solutions if it were set equal to 0. Okay? But they also tell us that this -5 is a 0. What would the factor be if the 0 is -5? If the 0 is -5, what was the factor? X plus 5. So here would be the function. But that's not the way we write polynomial functions. We have to write them all out in multiplied form. So I'm going to have to FOIL this out. I have to do this times this is x cubed. Multiply these, I get minus x squared. Multiply these, I get 14x. These, I get plus 5x squared. These, I get -40x. And that is going to be plus 70. So that means my function, they want me to call it g, is going to be x cubed minus 3x squared minus 26x plus 70. That's going to be the function that gives me these solutions that they told me. Questions? All right, let's go to a different kind of problem. Use the information in the graph to answer the questions. Here's the graph. What are the real zeros of the function? In other words, what values make this function 0? Can you tell? What are they?
0 and -6.
Good. Now, we talked about multiplicity a while ago. -6, we go straight through that, so it just has a multiplicity of 1. But at 0, it's bouncing. What did we say about that multiplicity? It would be a 2, wouldn't it? Multiplicity of 2. Now it says to write an equation of the cubic function in factored form. So the name of the function they give us is f. If I get 0 as a solution, what was the factor that would give me 0 as a solution? Just x, isn't it? But I'm not going to just put x. What do I have to put? X to what power? Second. X to the second, because it's a bounce right there. And then I have -6 as a 0. What would that have been as a factor? X plus 6. Okay? Any questions on that? And it says we can write it in factored form. That's great because I don't have to multiply this out if it's in factored form. Okay? The other one said to write a polynomial function. That means the whole thing has to be written out. Okay, instead of doing the problem that you have on your paper, I want to do this one instead. See if you guys can help me. You don't need to even write this down. Just kind of watch. Suppose a polynomial function of degree 4 has solutions of -4, 0, and 5 plus radical 7. Find the polynomial function. Does anybody know how we would start this problem? Evan?
Find the product and sum of 5 plus square root of 7 and 5 minus square root of 7.
Awesome. Okay, so he knows that if this is a solution, so is this one. And so what is the sum? If I add those two, what are we going to get? 10 is right. Okay, the product, this is a little tougher. We have to FOIL this out. 5 times 5. Now what is always happening to the outers and inners on this? They're canceling, aren't they? Think about what the product is going to be then. First times first, outers, inners cancel, and then what's the last times the last? You guys know what the product is then? 18. Can somebody tell me what this would be then? What would the quadratic function be? Yeah, Derek.
It would be x squared minus 10x plus 18.
Good. All right, so that's going to be for this part. We're done with that. We're done with this. Let's go to this one. Do you guys know what the factor would be if we have a solution of -4? X plus 4, good. I'm going to write that over here. And then what about if I have 0 as a solution? What would the factor be? X. So let's go ahead and multiply these two together. What do I get if I multiply those two together?
X squared 4x.
Good. So now I've got all of this that I need. But it asks us to find the polynomial function. So that means now I have to just multiply all this out. I think you guys can do this. I'm going to pause for just a second, stop talking and let you think about it, and I'll be doing it up here, and we'll see if we can agree on an answer.
How does the first one start with x squared? I say I got the 10x and 18, but where did you get the x squared for it?
For this or for this one?
Yeah, that one.
Right here?
Yeah.
It's a formula we learned. It goes x squared minus the sum, x plus the product. And then if anybody gets my answer, let me know. Thank you. All right, I'm going to assume this answer's right. Hopefully you can get the same thing.